Donald Trump says the U.S. will send sophisticated military equipment to Ukraine, including Patriot air defense missiles. It comes as the U.S. president once again voices frustration with Vladimir Putin amid intensified attacks on Ukrainian cities and stalled progress on ceasefire talks. Let's get more on this with Stefan Wolf, Professor of International Security at the University of Birmingham. Stefan, good to have you with us today. So one of the so-called sophisticated equipment to Ukraine are these Patriot missiles. They've been around for a very long time and are mainly to intercept incoming missiles. If Ukraine does get its hands on more of them, would it be a game changer for Ukraine on the war front?
No, I really don't think that the amount of Patriot missiles that the US is currently talking about will be a major game changer. What it will do for Ukraine, though, is potentially increase a little bit of its air defense capabilities, where the country has been exposed to very large-scale Russian attacks, both of drones and ballistic missiles. Basically, over the past 4 weeks, almost every day, we have heard of largest attacks that Russia has mounted against Ukraine since the beginning of the war more than 3 years ago.
And there are also reports at the moment that the US might even consider sending offensive weapons. Do you ever see that happening in the context of this war?
Well, I think what we have seen there is basically since the end of last year, not only did the US send offensive weapons, but they also relaxed a little bit the restrictions that they posed on Ukraine in terms of using those weapons. And this, again, is really important for Ukraine because it would enable the country to strike at key logistics hubs that Russia has just across the border on Russian territory. This will be important both for the conflict on the Donetsk front and Luhansk front in the east of Ukraine, but increasingly also in terms of the northern front that Russia has opened in the or against the Ukrainian region of Sumy.
Yes, we've heard Donald Trump's increasing frustrations with Vladimir Putin. They are more public, saying that, he talks nice, then he bombs everything. Did the US president underestimate by quite a great degree his ability to end the war?
Yeah, I think that's very obvious. I think at the moment, given that Trump had promised everybody that he could end this war in 24 hours. And I mean, we are now many months into his second term, and we are nowhere nearer even a temporary ceasefire that Ukraine accepted several months ago on American pressure. What is striking, though, is really the unwillingness of Trump to actually react to Putin stalling. So we have not seen any sanctions by the US since Trump came in. And this fabled bill that is now in front of the Senate will actually not impose sanctions as such, but it will give Trump the ability to do so if he chooses. And so far, unfortunately, we have to assess that he is not willing to do that.
Yes. And what do you think Washington's NATO allies will be making of this, both his inability to convince Vladimir Putin to step back as far as this war is concerned, but also the fact that, they are now providing perhaps these Patriot missiles? Are NATO leaders also, quietly saying to themselves, well, we told you so?
I'm sure some of them will do that. I think for NATO, what it means is basically two things. One is that reassuringly, Trump has not completely turned his back on Europe and Ukraine. He has not been able to make a deal with Putin on the back of Ukrainian and European interests. So that is quite positive. On the other hand, however, I think it confirms that his approach to foreign policy is very, very unpredictable. So even if today he decides that he will send more Patriot missiles, tomorrow he might decide that he will relax permissions for Ukraine to use offensive against targets deeper inside Russia. All of this then could, again, change with the next tweet that he puts out, with the next comment that he makes on his own social media channel, Truth Social. So in that sense, we do not have the degree of predictability that I think above all Ukraine and Europe would really appreciate from the US administration.
Yes, and Professor Wolf, can you perhaps detail for us, with Donald Trump's inability to convince, or even Putin, thinking I will not be dictated to by the US, what his overall aims still are as far as Ukraine is concerned?
You mean Trump's aims or Putin's aims?
Putin's aims.
But Putin's aims, I think they have not really changed since the beginning of the war, and certainly not since the end of 2022. He wants a full recognition by Ukraine and presumably by the international community of the annexation, not just of Crimea that happened in 2014, but of 4 additional regions in the south and east of Ukraine, of which Putin controls about 80 to 90%. So he doesn't even fully control all the territories he claims inside Ukraine. The second point is that he is adamant that Ukraine must never join NATO. And the third point, which very often is referred to as the so-called root causes of the conflict, that goes back to a proposal that the Russians submitted back in December 2021, so even before the Ukrainian war started. And that was to basically ask NATO to pull back all of its troops and military equipment to behind the lines prior to the first NATO enlargement in 1999. All of these, I think, are clearly unacceptable to Ukraine and to the West, including, I would argue, to the United States and the alliance structures that we have in place.
Yes, in another facet of the war, Stefan, we saw the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and of course Kim pledging unconditional support for Russia's efforts in Ukraine. So is Russia there to seek more troops from North Korea?
I think that is one of the key assumptions at the moment that people are making, that this is just a prelude to another potentially quite large-scale deployment of North Korean troops, not necessarily to the battlefields in Ukraine itself, or even though I would not exclude that completely, but more likely to support Russian operations from inside Russia, for example, in the north, in relation to offensives in Kharkiv and Sumy.
And just finally, might that go beyond personnel? Because there are reports there that North Korea has sent ballistic missiles to Russia. Is there a basis for that?
Absolutely. I think this was what started it all in terms of the more intense military cooperation between Russia and North Korea. Apparently, North Korea has massively supplied Russia with artillery ammunition. Also, as you mentioned, with ballistic missiles, even those do not have the same accuracy that some of the Russian manufactured ones have. And we must also not forget that the weapon of choice at the moment for Russia, in particular in the air campaign, is Iranian Shahed drones.
Okay, Professor Stefan Wolf, really appreciate your insights and analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.